All right, today we are dismantling a massive myth. Most people just walk around believing intelligence is strictly what you learned in school, or, maybe how well you perform at your 9 to 5. We tend to think of it as this fixed score on a test. But psychology reveals something vastly more interesting and honestly deeply impactful. We're going to look at how lower cognitive patterns quietly, almost invisibly, shape every single aspect of how a person experiences life, processes the world, and solves daily problems. We're literally looking at the mechanics of the mind. And there's a hard truth we really need to face right up front. Low intelligence often manifests as a collection of invisible struggles that make daily life feel overwhelming, confusing, and repetitive. This reframes the whole picture. These aren't just personality quirks. We aren't talking about someone just being, difficult. We are talking about specific mechanical cognitive limitations that create serious, everyday friction. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our mental map for this explainer. 1. The hidden reality of intelligence. 2. Navigating daily executive functions. 3. Social cues and cognitive overload. 4. Blind spots and big pictures. And finally, 5. Rewiring your thinking patterns. Starting with Section 1, the hidden reality of intelligence. Because intelligence isn't just about reciting facts, it's the very lens through which you view reality. And lower cognitive patterns create a really subtle but pervasive hurdle in just existing and functioning smoothly. That brings us to Section 2, navigating daily executive functions. This is where we pop the hood and look at the brain's internal mechanics. Executive functioning is basically your cognitive ability to organize information, anticipate outcomes, and build a mental map of what comes next. Imagine stepping into a packed grocery store without a list, absolutely no mental layout of the aisles, and honestly no idea what meals you're even cooking for the week. For someone with limited executive function, that kind of reactive chaos is how they experience almost every task. It's really important to understand this isn't laziness, it's a mechanical limit in how the brain organizes information. Now, when working memory is strong, real-time processing lets us hold and apply steps smoothly. But when it's limited, we see what's called mental blindness. Think of someone trying to build a piece of IKEA furniture without ever looking at the manual, just kind of forcing pieces together even when they clearly do not fit. They just can't adapt the instructions to the reality right in front of them. At work or at school, this looks like constantly forgetting steps in a sequence or needing the exact same explanation repeated over and over and over again. And naturally, this leads to poor feedback processing. Because the brain struggles to connect cause and effect, the person lacks the metacognitive awareness to actually look inward. They don't analyze their own actions. The result? They're basically trapped on a treadmill, repeating the exact same professional blunders or failing relationships, completely unable to process the feedback that life is loudly giving them. Section 3, social cues and cognitive overload. Now, if simple tasks are this taxing, what happens when we introduce other people into the mix? Well, navigating the unspoken rules of conversation becomes an absolute minefield. Due to lower social cognition, you see a real difficulty reading emotional cues or tone. They might misinterpret people's intentions in group settings or find sarcasm and complex jokes really hard to grasp. Ultimately, forming deep, abstract connections is nearly impossible because the underlying data of human interaction is literally just bypassing them. And when things get abstract, the brain essentially enters a mental short circuit. Faced with a multi-layered problem, they just hit a brick wall. This causes immediate, overwhelming frustration. And rather than working through that friction, the default defense mechanism kicks in. They give up, they procrastinate, or they avoid the task entirely. The friction is just way too high. So you might be asking, why does managing multiple responsibilities feel physically and mentally impossible? The answer is cognitive overload. Whether it's managing a busy household, trying to cook dinner while the phone is ringing and a kid is crying, or solving a logical puzzle, it doesn't just feel hard, it feels insurmountable. Again, scratch the idea that this is a lack of willpower. It's a structural limitation of the brain's processing power getting entirely jammed by too many variables all at once. Moving on to Section 4, blind spots and big pictures. And this brilliantly illustrates how lower cognition actually masks itself, often through a very narrow worldview. Highly intelligent minds are pattern hunters. They naturally spot hidden connections, inconsistencies, and underlying motives. But those with lower cognitive patterns often see the world as just a series of isolated events. To them, everything seems random. This makes them highly, highly vulnerable to scams, manipulation, and terrible advice, simply because they trust information way too quickly, especially if it conveniently confirms a bias they already hold. And this vulnerability is usually shielded by the infamous Dunning-Kruger effect, which is when people with lower abilities vastly overestimate their own skills, simply because they don't know enough to recognize their own blind spots. You know the exact type, the guy at a dinner party speaking with absolute, unwavering certainty about complex geopolitical issues he read literally one single headline about. To them, saying "I don't know" feels like a direct attack, and they frequently confuse a simple disagreement with a personal insult. It really culminates in this narrow cognitive scope. A highly intelligent mind naturally zooms out to see how a single situation fits into a massive, multi-year strategy. Conversely, a mind constrained by lower cognitive patterns stays trapped in the immediate, surface-level details. Ask them to engage in strategic reasoning or predict long-term consequences, and it feels entirely confusing. They just cannot see the bigger picture. Which brings us to Section 5, rewiring your thinking patterns. So the crucial point is, intelligence is not a fixed life sentence. Intelligence isn't a fixed score that defines your entire life, but it does define the strategies you use to navigate it. These cognitive constraints we've talked about, from poor feedback processing to cognitive overload, are effectively just default strategies. And the absolutely incredible news from psychology is that your thinking patterns can be changed. You can literally rewire these patterns through deliberate mental sweat. Here's how. 1. Practice complex problem solving to force your brain to juggle variables. 2. Engage in active reflection. Build that metacognitive muscle by looking inward, actually analyzing your actions, and connecting cause and effect so you stop repeating the same mistakes. And 3. Challenge yourself with new, uncomfortable mental exercises. By deliberately pushing against these boundaries, you can strengthen your reasoning and overcome these invisible limitations. Which leaves us with one vital question. Are you willing to do the mental work to see the patterns you've been missing? Whether you recognize these invisible struggles in yourself, or maybe you're just trying to better understand the behavior of the people around you, the path forward requires actively rewiring how you process reality. What happens to your life when you finally decide to upgrade the mechanics of your mind? Thanks for exploring this with me today.